Hello, my name is Nick, and this is a guide to self improvement for the young Christian man. Let's hop straight into it. So, first of all, I'm going to give you my journey in self improvement. Um, so, I first discovered the self improvement scene, the likes of Hamza and Andrew Tate in 2022, as did many others. And at first, I found it to be a very rewarding um, part of my life. Where I would wake up, I would journal, I would meditate, take a cold shower, then lift and go on a walk, and then do homework, whatever. It was great at first, but I found it was very mundane because the end goals of self improvement in many self improvement spaces seem to be very shallow. To get women, hook up, make a ton of money, and die. That's reality. Um, for a lot of these guys, this is what they preach, and maybe they won't say it, but that's the reality of the type of self improvement they preach is honestly it's dangerous. Um, I think modern self improvement is shallow. I think it is inherently shallow. Self improvement is a temporary mask to a more permanent problem. The permanent problem being our eternity in heaven and kind of some, maybe past insecurities, some trauma we've had growing up. We mask it with what? Making a ton of money, getting a good physique, getting a bunch of women, gaining a bunch of status, too. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with having a good physique. There's nothing wrong with being able to attract a partner. That's a more fine line, when it comes to what you do with that partner. Status, there's nothing wrong with having status. I think status is a good thing to have because it gives you leverage in the world, which, we are still in this world. I'm not saying we need to be like fully focused on it, but we need to realize that we still have duties on this earth. God put us in this world for a reason. Um, so yeah, physique, money, and status aren't inherently bad, but self-improvement tends to make these things an idol as breaking one of the Ten Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. And this is kind of what self improvement does without necessarily saying it, right? It's not like Andrew Tate is going out here and saying that working out is your God or making money is your God, but rather he subtly implies that through the things he says, and you subtly believe that because you are fed. No, what you are fed is how you act, right? Everything that you consume is going to be digested and it's going to come out somehow. So, how do we fix the shallow self improvement of today, of the modern day? Well, I think the first thing we need to do is view self improvement as improving ourselves in order to serve others around us and God. A lot of what self improvement is today is improving yourself in order to make yourself feel fulfilled. There's nothing wrong with feeling fulfilled, but this sense of fulfillment is actually false because it's like, yeah, I'm jacked. I have a lot of money and I have a lot of women. That's not true fulfillment. That's a mask, like I talked about earlier. We need to improve ourselves in order to serve the others around us, the people we care about. If we go to the gym and we get stronger, say your grandma, says like, you know, hey, can you help me move in? Or whatever, say she's moving. And you're able to do that. You're able to, pick up the couch or whatever and bring it upstairs, something like that. Because she can. That's awesome. And that's valuable. And then that's kind of what I mean by improving yourself to serve others around you and serve God. If we can improve ourselves, we can improve our focus, we're going to have better prayer sessions. We're going to be able to have more discernment in times of distress. So that's what I mean when I mean improving yourself to serve others around you and our Heavenly Father. Find your God given purpose and then make money off of that. So when it comes to money, people think that the only thing that matters is how much money you make, not what it takes to get there. I think there's a lot of people that assume that. They get blinded by the greed, they get blinded by the cash, right? Cash rules everything around me. Um, all right, well, nonetheless, let's get back to it. They are blinded by this sense that how much they make is the only thing that matters. The journey to get there doesn't actually matter, where it really does maybe matter more. If you find your God given purpose and you can use that to make money, that's great because you're going to be so much more fulfilled and you're probably going to make more money off of it anyway. Think about it, right? If you're motivated, most days, obviously not every day, you're going to be like super hyped, to get up and work. Some days maybe you slept bad, your girl broke up with you, whatever. You're not gonna be like super hyped to get up and work, but still it's gonna be not as bad. And when you work, you're gonna start to kind of enjoy it, right? Um, it makes life easier. And if you truly enjoy doing it, you're gonna do it more. You're gonna enter, flow state. You're gonna build that skill so much more so that if you practice that skill for 5 to 10 years, you're going to be good at it. You're going to be successful with it. Excuse me. You're going to be successful with it. Um, and yeah, so you probably make more money anyways. You know what I mean? And fitness is no longer for looks first, rather ability first, and then appearance second. So, like I talked about, like with the grandma, moving your grandma an analogy, we want ability to be the main focus, the main driver of why we work out. But fitness, the appearance element of fitness does still have some leverage because there is a halo effect. If you walk into a room jacked, people are going to take you more seriously than if you walk in and you're super scrawny or you're overweight, right? So there's some to be said about appearance, but if you work out for ability, where you're training your absolute strength, your relative strength, endurance, speed, flexibility, things like that, appearance will come as a byproduct. You are not going to be a twig if you train those abilities. You're not going to be fat if you train those abilities. Obviously, diet has a role to play still, but you know what I mean? For the most part, you won't be. So that's assuming you have everything else locked in. Those are three quick solutions I think we can, use to fix the modern self-improvement scene, the way in which we approach money and the way in which we approach fitness, two of really the biggest things in modern self-improvement, and two things that do matter in our life. I mean, let's be honest. Changing our viewpoints, changing our perspective on those is going to be a huge deal. Um, Here are some habits to avoid that are all too common in the self-improvement scene as of today. Meditation. This is a controversial one. Um, Very common in Buddhism, Hinduism, Eastern practices. It's kind of more so associated with Buddhism. Basically, like attempting to clear your mind. I honestly don't think you can do that. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if you're watching this and you're like a Buddhist or whatever, comment, if you can truly do that. But I really think you can. And even if you do, it can allow negative thoughts to enter our mind. And, if we're trying to clear our mind, we're not present on God. Um, if we're sitting still, just soaking everything in, but we don't actually have God there, Negative thoughts can creep in really quickly, whether that be temptation, whether that just be like thoughts of depression, stressful thoughts, anything negative. We don't want that. I think that's something we should actually avoid. And that's really pushed by guys like Hamza Ahmed. I do like Hamza Ahmed. He's a really cool guy. I've learned a lot from him, but I think we should kind of steer clear of that. I'm not saying breath work is bad, like 4-7-8 breathing, box breathing. That's different than meditation. Meditation goes a lot deeper, to religious contexts, things like that. I would avoid parties or hookups, which is promoted by many of like the hustle culture bros as kind of the pinnacle of life. Guys like Andrew Tate. I think Andrew Tate has fallen off, but still, he's promoted. Like, this is promoted as like the zenith of life, the apex, right? You're gonna work super hard, then you're gonna party, and you're gonna hook up with women. Where's the true value in that? Where's the true life in that? There's really nothing to it. When you really think about it, it's lust, it's booze, it's degeneracy all around. That is not the pinnacle of life. There's so much more to that. Steer clear of that. Work hard so that you can build a family. Work hard so that you can be closer to God. Work hard so that you can feel fulfilled beyond the material things. Not materialistic, vain, sinful BS like parties, hookups, anything along the lines of that. Another thing we need to do is avoid essentialism. Now, essentialism isn't something that's like inherently preached by everyone, but I do think that it's once again kind of with what I was talking about earlier, it's subtly preached. Just focus on money. Just have a season of your life where 90 days you're gonna get as rich as possible. You sacrifice everything for that. You sacrifice your health, your fitness, your relationship with your family, your friends, um, you know, girlfriend, whatever, wife. That wife, that's a major problem. Kids, that's a huge issue. And you probably won't even make as much money anyways because your health sucks, your relationships suck, you're not actually truly fulfilled. You're just this like, kind of like you're just this slave to money who measures his worth in productivity and how much he worked towards making 10 grand a month or whatever that may be. That's stupid. Same thing with physique, right? Where all you're gonna do is grind on getting as jacked as possible for like a year. Or you end up taking roids, destroying your health, and oh, now I can't have kids. It's stupid, slippery path to go down. And I think many times, especially when it comes to money, this is preached as the end all be all of life when there's so much more to it. We need to be well rounded as men. Like the Roman ideal was always to be intelligent, spiritually, strong, physically capable. Those were the big three. Now, spiritually, I think they had some issues. Up until Constantine, the Romans would persecute Christians. They burn them at the stake. But nonetheless, right, they still like worship their pagan gods, whatever. I'm not saying that's good, but there was still a spiritual ideal that we can apply to, you know, the logos, our Lord Jesus Christ instead. Um, this is kind of a tangent to end this video off, but there's a book that was published in the 1970s by Stanford Research Institute. It was a textbook, and it's called Changing Images of Man. And it talks about kind of like what does the future look like for the human race? Bear in mind, it's the 1970s, technology is booming. This is like Vietnam, post Vietnam, I think, where we kind of had the hippie movement. The first time we saw some distrust, with the government in America. What are we going to do, in the future, right? What are the plans, right? And they talked about this is going back to meditation, but I'm going to circle this back to everything. They talked a lot about incorporating Eastern religious practices into Western society. So things like meditation, right? And this kind of like whole like spirituality, crystals, things like that. They talked about incorporating that and kind of bringing that to the forefront of what spirituality looks like rather than, our religion being rooted in God and, Jesus Christ. It's this kind of vague, like hippie thing. It doesn't actually make much sense or have any kind of logical bearing. It's all this like mysticism, and there's nothing wrong with mysticism, to a certain extent, but we need to have logic behind that. And Eastern spirituality, in my opinion, possesses little to none. And this is what they want, right? Let's skew religion, let's skew spirituality. Um, so we see things like meditation now as kind of like this cool, hip, spiritual thing, or even just incorporated as like a de-stressor, something to relax you, to help you fall asleep, to do before a workout, a big sports game you may have, anything like that. Meditation is like it's just another tool now. And this is what they wanted, but I think this ties back to everything else because they want to divide men and women, as well. And we saw this red pill movement. We saw feminism, then we saw the red pill to counteract that. They hate each other. Now we're seeing the Groypers, like the Nick Fuentes bros, who think like there's no hope, that you're never gonna find a good woman, anything like that. It's sad to see, but this is what has been the plan for a while. It just has really come in to fruition like the past 10 years, really like, man, past like 5 years, it's been full go. And they're sending it. Um, so I think we see this tying into self-improvement. So we need to have discernment when it comes to things like this because there's something deeper there that has flooded into self-improvement, that has flooded in to the way we perceive ourselves, and we need to avoid that. Last part, on a more encouraging note, the whole goal of self-improvement really should be to become Christ-like, to sanctify oneself. The process of theosis for my Orthodox brothers and sisters, we need to become more like Christ. Christ was the epitome of masculinity, his self control, his love, his ability to defend his viewpoints, to defend himself, and his ability to undergo persecution from this world is what we need to strive for. That's the pinnacle of masculinity, not Andrew Tate, not Hamza. Though I think both of them have some good points, they're not God. They're not Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? We need to look towards God. We need to read and study the lives of the saints and, to discover how these holy people were able to become such great and holy people. Um, Obviously, we don't hold them in the same position as God, but we can look at these people and say, he lived or she lived such a great, holy life. Like, how do I give like that? And they write, they have teachings. And when you study this, this is the true pinnacle of self improvement. This is what we should strive for. So, on that note, I thank you for watching. If you liked the video, like, comment, subscribe, the typical routine. And, God bless.